Today's episode is a little different, but I believe in my heart it's one of the most important conversations that we're ever going to have on this podcast. And please pardon my voice. Yes, I have a cold, but the show must go on. Anyway, as many of you know, I recently lost my mom, and walking through that experience opened up my eyes to just how unprepared many of us are when it comes to aging parents, serious illness, and end-of-life decisions, and even having the conversations that matter the most before it's too late. Some of this even impacting or things that we need to be prepared for also, not just our aging parents. The truth is many of us women are in a season of life where we're not only focused on our own health and fitness, but we're also helping care for aging parents. And yet most of us have never been taught what questions to ask and what decisions need to be made, or how to navigate these incredibly emotional situations. And that's why I wanted to bring on today's guest, Kristy Mikell. And Kristy is a palliative care nurse practitioner who specializes in helping patients and families navigate serious illness, dementia, caregiving, and end-of-life care with compassion, dignity, and support. And she comes with actually decades of experience. My hope is that this conversation helps you feel a little bit more prepared, a little less afraid, and gives you some practical guidance for conversations that many of us need to start having right now. So let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Rock That Fitness with Anna Rockstar, and Kristy Mikell joining me today. She is an amazing palliative nurse practitioner, I should say, and super excited to have you, Kristy. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I think we might have had just a little bit of a delay there. We're obviously dealing with some technicalities here, among other things, of both of us having some kind of a, I don't know, crud, cold or something, but we both have something.
We're
going to get through it.
Each other.
No, many, many, many miles away. Because are you in Tampa? Where do you live?
I'm in Central Florida, not Tampa, but I'm about an hour from
No,
Tampa.
okay.
Right near Mickey Mouse and near Kissimmee.
That's right. Because I'm supposed to come and stay with you so I can go to Disney. And don't put it past me. Okay. Y'all, Kristy is just she's got such a big heart. I met Kristy at a business conference at the end of last year, and had no idea that we were going to have this relationship. And she's also a member in Rock That Fitness, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But Kristy, I wanted to invite you on the show because in light of all the things that I have been going through recently, having to do with my mom's illness and dealing with that for so long, and then of course, her passing and everything I dealt with in the hospital. It's not the first time that I have dealt with someone dying in the hospital and being by their bedside. But it was obviously, for me, the most challenging, difficult time for me personally because of just the circumstances, and it's just my mom. But you do this, day in and day out. You take care of caregivers as well as people who are dealing with death and dying. And so I just thought, man, I knew that I wanted to it's crazy because I wanted to bring you on the podcast a long time ago. I thought, there's going to come a time. I didn't know when or why. I just felt like in my heart there was going to be a time. Honestly, I was like, this was way before my mom went in the hospital. I had this on my mind that I would bring you on the podcast just because so many women that are in our, I don't know, we're aging. We're in this time of life where our parents are aging. And that's typically what's happening. We become the caregivers of our parents and we're watching them age. And then it's just a lot. There's a lot going on because we have a lot of responsibilities. We're working, we're taking care of a family, and then on top of that, dealing with either, a parent who is ill or dying. and it's a lot. And you are the expert in this. And since I've been going through this, I wanted to bring you on the podcast to talk about this because I thought this is just timely. It was meant to be. And I know that you're going to have some wonderful insights. Aside from the fact that you've been an amazing inspiration in Rock That Fitness as a client of mine, and I'm excited to continue working with you. But I do want to highlight that in this episode as well. But today we can talk about any number of things because I know that you're a wealth of information. But some of the things I hope we can cover are things like you talk a lot about how to start the hard conversations before a crisis happens. Things that we need to be thinking about, legal things, medical documents, even what dying actually may look like, and the things that we need to think about when this stuff is actually happening. And then what palliative care is and how that may be different from hospice care, and also how we can care for ourselves when we're caring for someone who is possibly dying or in an illness state. So these are some of the things, but if you've been listening to my podcast, you know that I like to just have a regular conversation and let things flow. So I've talked enough. Let us first give you the opportunity to introduce yourself a little bit more. Tell us more about you, what you do, and why you do what you do.
Okay, well, thank you. And I want to just take a minute to say, I followed you on your journey with your mom, and we only get one mom, and I'm sorry for what you went through. I think you handled it with grace and handled it really beautifully in sharing it with all of us. So I just want to take a minute to say that. I don't want to bring out any tears or anything, so I'm going to move right through it.
Thank you.
But I am a mom of 3. That's my first identity, who are all taller than me and have turned out to be much better humans than I am, so I'm very proud of them. My youngest is 19 and in college. I have been a nurse for over 20 years. I did, 26 years now, I guess. I did critical care for most of my nursing career, and I've done all of the types of critical care. I've done CVICU, which is heart. I've done neuro ICU, which is brain. I've done trauma ICU, medical surgical ICU. So I've seen a little bit of everything except maybe transplant ICU. So I've had a vast experience of being at the bedside with people when they are not doing so well and talking with their families. I did a year of home-based palliative care, which I loved. I didn't think I would enjoy being in people's homes, but I really did. And now I'm doing in-hospital palliative care. So that's a little bit about me. Did I answer all the questions?
No, wow. What a wealth of information you come with. That's amazing. And, I think one of the things that comes to mind when you say being in the hospital and you talk with the family of the patient, I had a situation where I was caring for my mother-in-law. This was my first marriage that I dealt with, my first time really face to face with someone dying and death. And one of the things that I think is a huge, huge thing is that, and I know this is going to, if we don't come up with this now, maybe I'm jumping ahead, but it's so hard when the patient is having all of these, they have all these, maybe a lot of illnesses, sicknesses that they're dying. They're actually dying, and we can do all kinds of things in the hospital. The medical team can do all kinds of things to keep people alive. And one of the hardest parts for me at that time, that was years ago, that was before I was a nurse. I was going to become a nurse. And I didn't understand. I didn't know what I needed to know. And I like what I was thinking was, is she dying? Are we keeping her alive? And is this suffering continuing? And it's because I'm saying do everything. I didn't know at the time until later on when I knew later, when she finally was in hospice care and dying. And the hospice care nurse told me, I'll never forget this lady, this nurse hugged me, and I told her that I was going to be a nurse. And she said, "You're going to be an amazing nurse." I was like, wow, thanks. But that's the part, because doctors and And the medical team, it's their job, it's their purpose in the hospital to maintain life and to do no harm. And they're going to do everything, and they're not going to have these hard conversations with the patient. What do you do differently? Do you have these hard conversations with your families?
I do about 8 times a day with, I would say 5 to 8 different families a day. And there are different, I meet people in different stages of their disease processes. So I will say that. Maybe I should start with the difference between palliative care and hospice. I think that's a good place to start to kind of address this.
Okay.
Both of them are really gung-ho on quality of life and symptom management. The real difference is that palliative care can come on at any stage of your chronic illness. So any chronic illness that we have to deal with, whether it be cancer, liver cirrhosis, COPD, congestive heart failure, those are some of the common things that we see, and we can come on at any stage and help to manage your chronic illness so you're not suffering from symptoms, so you're not visiting the hospital as much in the hospital to try to prevent you from coming back from the hospital. Hospice helps focus on quality of life and comfort-focused treatment, symptom management at the end stages of your illness. And so at that point, we've elected to withdraw curative-focused treatment, where we're focused on prolonging no matter what, and the focus becomes comfort-focused treatment, allowing nature to do what it does. We all will die. And so making that a peaceful and comfortable journey rather than prolonging things in the hospital. So when I meet somebody in the ICU who we have put on a ventilator or what we call life support, or we have done CPR, or we think we might have to do CPR and put them on a ventilator soon, I'm very clear to say that these are things that we would die if we didn't do these things. It's not fair to not say that. You need to know the truth. And I had this conversation just today with a family who had elected to do all of these things for this patient with a very big brain injury, who is not going to have any recovery. He already had a trach and was off and on of the vent. He had a feeding tube at this point. And so multiple times during this hospitalization, we've had to put him back on a vent. We've had to put him back on medications to keep his blood pressure up, to keep him alive. He would have died multiple times, and we're stopping that. We're okay at stopping it most of the time. Eventually we can't. And so then it does become this question of what's the most important thing right now? If our time is short, and this goes for any stage of your chronic illness, if your time is short and you know that it's shortening every day, what is the most important thing to you right now? Is it living as long as possible no matter what? Meaning, if I can't talk to my family, if I can't interact with them, but my heart's still beating, I'm okay with that? Or is it something different? Some people have a different tolerance. Some of us don't want to be bedbound. Some of us don't want to have tubes in us. And we're all a little bit different with that. But I think that is the most important directive question. What is the most important thing to that person right now? And sometimes we're not ready to answer that, and that's okay. But to bring those questions to light and to recognize that the body is trying to do something here. It is trying to die. We might be able to stop it. This is what that's going to look like. And that's hard.
Yeah.
That's really hard.
It is very hard
to grapple with. Yeah.
It's hard. I think it's very, very hard. I don't know when this stuff was going on with me in the hospital with my mom, and they had trached her, and they had, they took it out and then they had to do it again. And there was just a lot with all of that. And on top of that, I had family that was, making it even harder, because as a nurse, I knew what was happening with the body. But I was dealing with family, and that makes it even harder. Especially it's your family, your family, your mom, and it just changes. It changes everything. But I had those questions too, because I wanted to know, like at this stage, after everything that's happened right now up to this point, what is the likelihood that she is going to recover? And if she does recover, what is that quality of life going to look like? That was my question.
Anna, that's such
That,
a big question. And I feel like that's the question we should be asking. Not, do you want CPR and life support? But what is that going to do after? What is after CPR and life support going to look like? I think that is such an important question to ask. I'm glad you were asking it.
and I got the answer one night from an NP that's been there for many, many years. But it was, again, I had a lot of pressure happening from an outside source that really made it even harder for me. And for me, I had to just be at peace knowing that she was in a state of, as comfortable as she could be. She was pretty much in a, medical induced coma, not knowing what's happening really. So that gave me peace as a nurse, but still the prolonging of this, it was prolonging not just the inevitable, but prolonging the suffering of those of us who are dealing with it, because so many things could have been going on with her if she had been able to make it through. There looks like it would have been prolonged. She would have been on dialysis because her kidneys had failed, and she had never had that before. Would she want to live like that? Probably not, knowing my mom, and they were also talking about the potential of ongoing tracheotomy, needing to have a trach to breathe. Would she want that? No. And then we're talking feeding tube. Okay, dialysis, trach, feeding tube, the peg. I was like, wow, he really brought this to light for me that night. And he said, there isn't a place locally that could handle that kind of care for her. She would have to live, in Houston or, I'm talking 4 hours away or somewhere. And at that point, I'm going, like, let's think this out, because that's not the kind of life she would want to live. In fact, she was fighting tooth and nail never to be in a nursing home, much less having all of these things to deal with. So it is a very important question to ask. What does that look like if we continue?
And I think, too, anytime a new treatment option is offered, we don't talk about, we just, okay, your kidneys are failing, you need dialysis. But we don't tell you what that looks like in reality and what you're signing up for. And we don't
Right.
tell you what our cancer treatment will look like and what you're signing up for. And
Yeah.
so we sign up for these things thinking this is going to make my life longer, but we don't ask, is it going to make my life better? Is it going to make my life worse?
Right.
And how do I feel
Yeah.
about that? And what do I think about that? And it's a disservice on our part as the medical team, and that I feel like we don't do that well in a lot of different areas. But specifically in the hospital, we will come in and tell you, this is the next thing that we need to do. This is the next thing that we need to do. But we don't tell you what happens after. We don't tell you what that really means for the patient, especially when they're in the ICU and we're talking about adding dialysis and a trach and a feeding tube and those types of things. The statistics for having had CPR and surviving it after 65, only 8% of those people are alive a year later. And I can guarantee you that all of those 8% have a worse quality of life than before they came to the hospital, because we've added things like the feeding tube and the trach and the dialysis and that type of thing. And a lot of times, because we get so weak in the ICU, we're not doing anything for ourselves when we're on a ventilator, even if we haven't had CPR. If we do survive, we're going to need extensive rehab, and we're going to not be able to walk, and we're going to sometimes not be able to feed ourselves or clean ourselves. And those are things that we don't tell people when they're in the ICU. Yeah.
So true. And, even as a nurse, like, I know what dialysis is. I knew what it was. But honestly, Kristy, I learned a lot about dialysis while I was going through this with my mom, those 18 days. I didn't realize how long of a commitment dialysis is. Like one session of dialysis, 3 hours, 4 hours long, depending on what's going on. And then ongoing outside the hospital. Now that's going to be part of their life 3 times a week. I'm like,
And
wow,
then and
I didn't
then
realize that.
you're out of commission for the rest of the day. Most people are, because it's exhausting.
Yeah,
We pull a
it's
third of your
exhausting.
blood out of your body and put it back in, and it is exhausting. And I don't think that's something that we
Yeah.
talk about when we ask you to decide if you want to have dialysis. So,
Yeah. So many things, I know I'm talking about this personally, but on a personal level, there was just so much against what was going on because my mother had exacerbated COPD, congestive heart failure. Her heart was weak. She didn't quite understand. I mean, believe me, I tried to help my mom understand for so long. I explained it so many different ways. She just didn't quite understand. She couldn't understand why the doctors can't fix her, but it was a chronic disease and she didn't get that. But yeah, even beyond that, if she had somehow managed to survive that ICU, time, all of the atrophy of the muscles and the heart being even weaker at that point, like all of that was, yeah, to be considered. And you're right. Like nobody's saying these things. It would help us as a family and as a caregiver by the bedside to understand better what's happening if the medical team could. I mean, I know they tell you, but you don't know I knew what questions to ask, but most people don't.
no, they
To
don't.
just know, to just kind of explain what the condition, everybody's different, what the conditions that this patient is dealing with, how it's impacting the different systems of their body, and what to potentially expect. Worst case scenario, and what is the best case scenario is probably what we need to know, you know.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's hard.
it is
It's hard to
hard.
think about, and
It is hard. And honestly,
and I'm and
oh, go ahead.
no, I just the reason I wanted, like I said, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because as women aging and our parents aging, we need to be prepared and we need to have these conversations so we can go into this, because being in this crisis mode is awful, awful, awful. But there are so many things that we actually can do proactively before we end up in the crisis. And let's go ahead and talk about that, because I remember trying to talk to my mom about stuff. She did not want to talk about death.
Yeah.
Now, on a spiritual level, my mom is a believer. I didn't, she believed in God. She had a spirituality about her, but she did not like talking about death. And I was like, Mama, at the very least, when you die, can you just tell me what you want us to do with your body? Like at least that.
Yeah.
And she told
Yeah.
me, and then it was like, okay. But yeah, let's talk about these hard conversations. What are the questions we need to be asking our aging parents or,
Okay.
ill family
This is
member?
my jam. I'm probably one of the only people you'll ever meet that says, yes, let's talk about death. And it's because in the ICU, when you're dealing with that crisis, is not the time to be having those conversations. So that I just get that out there.
Right.
That's exactly where I was heading. And there's there's so much to talk about, right? Getting your ducks in a row. Let's talk about that first. What are the paperwork that needs to be done? I would say you definitely need to know who's going to make your decisions if you're not able to. And at some point, all of us will not be able to make our own decisions. So whether it's because we've already died or because we are confused or unconscious or something along those lines. So each state has their own proxy law. I know Florida's proxy law is your spouse is your decision maker. If you can't make your decisions, and then your children, and then your siblings, and so on, all the way down to a friend who thinks they know something about you. So
Okay.
every state has their own proxy law. So if you don't choose, it could be that your wife that you're estranged from but never divorced is going to make your decisions. Or your
Right.
kid who has disowned you and gone away will be your decision maker. So it's very important
Right.
that you pick someone if it's not the person that would, you know, default to. There is paperwork called a healthcare surrogate form. Each state probably has their own. It usually requires 2 witnesses, where you say, I, Kristy, designate my best friend, Joe, to be my healthcare decision maker. And then the next step is to tell them that you designated them and have
Is that the same? Excuse me. Is that the same as an advance directive?
It is one of the advanced directives. There are multiple advanced directives. Designating your
Okay.
healthcare decision maker is an advanced directive. There is an advanced directive. Also, let me just finish and say, make sure you tell your surrogate that you've designated them and that you've talked to them about what your wishes are. And we'll get more into that. Other paperwork, other advanced directives, if you do not want CPR, if you do not want life support, then you need a DNR or a MOST or a POLST. Those are different in different states. POLST and MOST stands for Physician or Medical Order for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And it will address things such as whether or not you want CPR, life support, a feeding tube. And then the DNR is specific for, or do not resuscitate, is specific for CPR and life support. There's also something called a living will. And what I'm seeing very often is that people have taken the time to complete a living will, which is another form of advanced directive. And the language on a living will is almost always similar. And it says something along the lines, if I have an end-stage condition, a persistent vegetative state, or I am terminally ill, I do or do not want these things done. And it talks about usually life-sustaining treatment. The living will directs your surrogate, the person that you've chosen to make decisions. It tells them what you would or would not want done. It is not an advanced directive that the medical team can follow. We need that DNR, POST, or MOST that's signed by a physician in order to honor your wishes. And I think most people don't know that part. That's what I'm seeing, that some people are getting this done and they don't know. I can't not resuscitate you because you have this form. I need your surrogate to come and fill out the other forms. So those are the paperwork part of it. And I know there was another part of your question that I was getting to. And I think it was, we were talking about chronic illnesses, and your mom had several. She had COPD, CHF that you mentioned. I think understanding that chronic illness is, like you said, something that's always going to be with you. But it's not just chronic, it's progressive. We don't teach that
Yeah.
part of it very well. It progresses over time and gets worse over time. And there aren't
Wow.
cures for most of these chronic illnesses like COPD. And so at some point, along the way, we're managing the illness. We're mostly treating symptoms. It's symptom management
Right.
that we're doing. And somewhere along the way, that disease is going to progress in such a way that you're going to be on this revolving door to the hospital. You're going to go to the hospital because you're feeling really cruddy. We're going to patch you up, put a little Band-Aid on this big giant hole, and send you back home, and then you come back. And so in the beginning of your chronic illnesses, especially dementia, I really just think that you should be having these conversations about, what is this going to look like? Ask your providers. What is this going to look like a year from now, 3 years from now? When I'm at the end stages, what can I expect? So that you can have the conversations about what is important to me, right? Do I want my last days to be on a ventilator, or do I want them to be at home? And those, again, are those really hard conversations that nobody wants to have, but will save your family. It's a gift you give to your family or your decision maker to say, this is how I feel about being on a ventilator. This is how I feel about dying in a hospital. This is how I feel about not being able to breathe because I have this chronic lung disease. And this is what I want. And there's nobody really out there having those conversations other than those few of us in palliative care. It takes a lot of time, and our physicians
True.
are working so hard to try to make you feel better, and not always able to take the time to say, hey, this is something you need to start thinking about. It's really hard.
So all of those things that you mentioned are considered parts of advanced directives.
Yeah, each of them are advanced directives. So you have your living will, your healthcare surrogate form, you have your most post or DNR, and there's probably some that I don't know about or have forgotten.
Also, a medical power of attorney.
That's the surrogate, yes, medical power of attorney, healthcare surrogate,
Okay, so that's
proxy.
this same
Right.
thing. Okay.
Not to be confused with oftentimes there's a power of attorney that covers only finances. So if you have a power of
Right.
attorney for someone, sometimes they'll put a healthcare clause in there. And
Okay.
I recommend reading through. I've read through a lot of them. They're like, oh, we got this in the bag. We took care of this paperwork. And there will be clauses saying that you can pay for their healthcare, but not a clause saying that you can make their healthcare decisions. It's very different. So I definitely recommend
Right.
checking into that. And a financial power of attorney is important. Um, sometimes you're going to need to pay bills or take care of those types of things when you're a caregiver.
So all of these documents you're talking about, are these things that we can just take care of with do we need to go see a lawyer for all this stuff? Where do you recommend we get this stuff taken care of?
Power of attorney has to be done with a lawyer. A medical power of attorney or healthcare surrogate form typically can be done at home. You can download it online. I don't know, do you do show notes or anything, Anna? I can give you a link
Oh yeah,
to put in the
I'm
show notes.
definitely gonna do show notes. Yeah,
Yeah.
because I know
So
that you've got some tools that you want to share, so we'll put that in there too.
I have a link to a website, and I can't remember the name of it. I apologize, but that
It's okay. We'll
actually
get
you
it.
can put in your state, and it will tell you what advanced directives you need in your state. So it's very good, and it actually gives you some to download and print. Some of them require two people to witness that are not the person or their surrogate. So just read what you need on there. But I think that's a really great website.
Right. Okay, cool. We'll definitely get that in there. So this is like great information, not just as a caregiver, but also thinking about ourselves before, we lose our minds, because we want to make sure that we're making these decisions before we start, aging in the mind and those kind of things. But also the fact that you just never know when something will happen. We can't just expect that we're going to all, get old and age, because sometimes things can happen in our lives where we end up in the ICU for whatever reason, any number of reasons. And it could be, and we want to have these things taken care of. We don't want to wait till we're old and dying. So for all of us, it's important for us to be thinking about these documents, these medical documents, and where should these be kept? And also, I just want to reiterate the importance of letting people know that you have these things, who's designated, so that there's no question and everybody knows, and they also know where these papers are kept.
Right. So I want to say about this too, before I tell you where they should be kept, that sometimes things change. Excuse me, how we feel about things change based on where we are in our illness. So today, I may want to be on a ventilator to get me through an acute illness. I don't have any chronic illnesses. But if I develop COPD, how I feel about that might change. Or if I know that I'm getting towards the end stages of my COPD, how I feel about those things might change. And so this isn't a one-stop conversation. This is something that we reevaluate over time, especially as we notice our loved ones or ourselves declining. Every doctor's visit, every hospitalization, every fall or urinary tract infection is an opportunity to kind of step back and reevaluate. Does my life look how I want it to look now? And do I still feel the same way about my advanced directives? Now, as far as where to keep them, a DNR, I recommend, or a most or a post, to keep on your refrigerator. And I have been told that EMS is supposed to look there, and they are part of the medical team that would have to honor those wishes from a DNR, MOLST, or POLST. I also recommend that your surrogate, your proxy, whoever your decision maker is, have a copy of everything. The rest of them can be kept in a safe place. You could keep them all by the refrigerator if you wanted. I recommend having a copy on your phone. So in a special folder that's labeled advanced directives that your surrogate or you can pull up if you're at the hospital, you can usually just email those to the social workers. They can print them out and put them on the chart. So you're not like carrying papers around. I've had people keep them in their car. I think that's very good. The Florida DNR, actually the bottom part cuts off and can go in your wallet. So you could certainly photocopy one and shrink it down into your wallet. But the living will is typically a several page document. It's more than one page, so that I just think that you and your decision maker should always know where they are, should have a copy readily available, whether that's in the car, in your purse, on the refrigerator, in your phone, wherever that is.
Okay, great. And you say on your refrigerator, but like I'm not ready to put that on my refrigerator.
Yeah.
Do you have that on your refrigerator?
It's really weird because my mom has one on her refrigerator, and my mom
I could
is
put
a
that on my
very
refrigerator.
healthy, well, she's a very active, healthy 67-year-old. Now she did just go through a battle with cancer, but she's very healthy for a 67-year-old, and so it's kind of strange to see that there. But it is meant to protect you so that we don't do things to you that you don't want us to do to you. And so it might not be pretty. Put it on the side somewhere, where it's not in your face, but yeah.
Definitely letting people know where it is, where to find it, and who's designated
Yeah.
is the most important. And do you have a guide or something like that that helps with things to be thinking about, questions, and
I have
having the hard questions?
I have a checklist of things that I
Okay.
recommend you do. And then I honestly, and I don't know if I have it out, because I do a kind of a guided session where I walk people through, hey, I'm seeing decline in my mom or dad or whoever. And with that, I do have a conversation guide that kind of helps you. Well, I can't have this conversation with my mom because she doesn't want to talk about death. What do I do? And there are some tricks and tips that we can use. And some of those look like, not talking about the actual person dying, like just, a famous movie star died, or someone in your church was in the hospital, or, talking about them and gathering information about how does your person feel about that, right? If they're not willing to talk about themselves, we've all heard, well, I don't want to be a
Yeah.
vegetable. I can't, if I had $1 for every time I heard that, right? So that gives me some
Yeah.
insight. At least that person doesn't want to be on the ventilator for the rest of their life, right? They don't want to trach,
Sure.
and so we kind of sometimes just extrapolate information by the conversations that we have. One
Right,
thing
right.
I hear a lot from, oh, he was a manly man and he would never want to have to be cleaned or anything. Well, then we know dignity is really important to him. What can we do to preserve his dignity? So sometimes it's not guidance from that person that says, I don't want this, let's do this, let's not do this, but things that we know about them that can help us make decisions for them when we are the person that has to do it.
Right. Yeah. Very good. I think this would be a great place to segue into taking care of the caregiver ourselves when we become this caregiver. I've had the opportunity, the honor of being a caregiver on more than one occasion myself. And my mom went into the hospital in 2020 to have open heart surgery, to have a valve replaced. So this is one of the things that I see is common, that a caregiver ends up totally neglecting themselves in the midst of caring for somebody who is sick, dying, and that kind of stuff. Do you want to speak to that? Because what I can talk till I'm blue in the face, girl, but I think it would be great to hear your perspective on that and how important it is and little steps, little things we can do to take care of ourselves.
I think it's something like 63% of caregivers become sicker than the person they're taking care of. There's some statistic out there that's pretty significant. And I have to really give props to my mom here, who I think is just a phenomenal example of what to do, because I see every day what not to do, which is just abandon yourself and, you know, put that person first. And as a mom, I felt like that, right? That I had to put my kids first in order to, keep them surviving, right? And to keep them alive sometimes. I think we
Yeah.
have a struggle with that. My stepdad had a major stroke a couple of years ago and was completely paralyzed on the left side. And
Oh, okay.
when he came home from the hospital, my mom was his primary caregiver. And they're in their 60s, obviously. And my mom continued to make time for herself to go to the gym, make time for herself to still eat the way that she's supposed to. She recognized that this was a marathon, which is something that I tell all of my patients when we have somebody declining. This is a marathon. It is not a sprint. It is not a weekend in the hospital and then we're back to normal. This is going to keep happening. And so you have to plan for the long game. And she knew that she needed to be strong enough to lift him if he fell. She needed to be strong enough to get his wheelchair in and out of the car. Do you know how heavy those things are? Um,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah. And she's 5'1", and this tiny little thing, knowing I really need to take care of myself. And she did not miss her gym days. She kept walking, she kept eating right, doing all the things she needs to do. As a caregiver myself,
Yeah.
being a nurse, having been a mom, a little bit of taking care of my mom during her cancer journey, I have learned how to not be the person I was. And a lot of that, thank you, Anna, is to you. That it's really in our mind where we need to put our focus, and that we really need to own the fact that if we're not taking care of ourselves, we cannot fully take care of another human. And something will happen to us along the way. And so learning that has been a journey for me, and I appreciate your help with that. I think
Well,
that,
it's so common. I
yeah,
mean, nurses
yeah,
are the worst.
we are the worst. I'm convinced we're
Yeah.
worse than doctors, and we joke about the man flu. I think we're worse than men. We just put up with it and keep digging our own grave, so to speak, you know.
True, true. And it's ultimately the most selfless thing that we can do is to take care of ourselves. And we have to remind ourselves, we do need to it's not easy because we've just been programmed in that way for
Right.
so long. But little steps, little things, like what you said, your mom still showed up to feed her, give herself nutritious foods and to exercise and stay doing that. We have to do. That's something that I did, in 2020 when my mom was in the hospital for all that time having her heart surgery. I was I no, I made my meal. I would get up earlier in the morning and I would do my workouts, go to the gym, go do my running, whatever. I'd make my meals and snacks for the day and I'd go see her at the hospital. I had food. I was there with her. And we just have to realize that we can't abandon ourselves. I love that you used that term because that's ultimately what so many women end up doing. They completely abandon themselves. And so they're not eating well, they're not exercising, they're not hydrating, they're not sleeping, recovering, resting, they're not managing their stress. And so they are declining and their health is declining. And in their mind, they're telling themselves, once this is over, I'll take care of myself. And sadly, it could be too late, and don't wait. We don't need to wait. Waiting is actually the worst thing you can do. We need to be showing up for ourselves. So it's just because I see this a lot. I'll see someone say, somebody, this is going on. I got to focus on this. Well, it's important. I understand. Believe me, I get it. But it's actually at any time in your life when you are having a crisis, it's even that much more important to make your health and your fitness a priority. So you really can show up for that person.
Yeah. And I
and
think if you
and be
think
the
it's
best
bad
caregiver.
taking care of one sick person and you're not taking care of yourself and you become the second sick person, then what's going to happen? And it's hard. I'm not going to lie. It is. I don't I
Yeah.
I don't know how my mom did that. She had caregivers coming in. She had friends, fortunately, and I know not everybody has that, but you also don't have to leave the house to take care of yourself. So I think, and the lie that I personally tell myself is, well, you can't do it perfectly, so don't do it. So don't do it. Doing it perfectly is the only way that counts. And I think that's
Right.
probably the biggest transformation that I've had with Rock Your Fitness is that I realized that doing it is better than doing it perfectly. And so I'm just showing up.
Yeah. Well, you're doing an amazing job. Let's go there. Tell us a little bit about your own personal transformation, which we know goes beyond the food and the fitness, especially what you just said. Can you talk to us a little bit about that for you?
Yeah, I think like I said, it's mostly been the mind shift. I was already exercising before joining um, Anna. My brain just stopped before joining
It's
Dr.
okay.
Fitness. It
You
just
joined
stopped.
us for, yeah, you came into a 6 week Kickstart program.
Yes, yes. And so I was already doing some exercising. I had already tweaked my eating some. I did learn a little bit about those things, but I think again, like the biggest transformation I had was in my mind. I definitely didn't even realize I was a perfectionist. And really that really came to light the other day when you and I were talking about doing this podcast and I was running late for the gym and that particular workout was a little bit longer. And so I was like, I can't finish. Huh. Well, I guess doing it is better than not doing it. Not doing some of it is better than not doing any of it. And so it
Yeah.
kind of dawned on me, you really have changed the way you think because before it would have been, just finish it just do it another time, skip this one, you
That's
know.
right.
And so
That's
that
right.
was a really big eye-opening thing. But I have had some remarkable changes in my lab work and with the help of you and my nurse practitioner, the insides of my body are catching up so that the outside of my body will start to hopefully, join. But it doesn't even matter because to me, it's more about being healthy than it is about what I look like. And so,
100%. But all
yeah,
that follows.
yeah, it does. It
And I
will.
love that you shared that. Yeah, you had shared that in the community, and it was like this right here. This is the stuff that matters, our health. And when we really like stop focusing on, trying to lose weight and look a certain way and all that, of course we all want that. We're not going to
Yeah,
pretend like we don't, right? But when we really focus on that health aspect and making small changes in our health habits, all of that is just that compounding effect,
right,
and it's going to
right.
get there, right?
Yep.
And I love that you said that because I'm so big on getting your labs and checking your labs because our labs are comprehensive medical metabolic panel, CBC, thyroid, sex hormones. Really understanding and knowing what's going on with our labs, that's going to help us understand all the systems happening on the inside. That's the
Yep.
stuff nobody sees. And
Yep.
this is the stuff that we can prevent chronic disease with, knowing our labs. So it's huge. So while we don't see the scale changing or something not really looking a different way aesthetically on the outside, man, knowing that your labs are improving, that's progress.
And I
That's
think
amazing. So I'm
if I
glad that
can
you brought
just
that up.
Yeah, if I can just put a plug in for, all of my life, my labs have looked normal, but not everybody was drawing the right labs. And so make sure that somebody's listening to you when you're saying, this is, I'm doing all the things, this isn't working, there's something. And that I think has been the big difference too, is I had somebody who was listening and watching me do all the things and So I think that's important to make sure that you have somebody who's willing to do a little investigation when things look
That's
right but
right.
aren't looking right.
That's right, because that's true. Not every provider is going to be giving you the best advice or help. And if you get your labs and they say, "Oh, everything looks normal," what does that really mean? And so if you're still having symptoms, whatever they are, and you're still struggling and you're noticing in your own biofeedback, but your provider's telling you your labs are normal, then nothing wrong with getting a second opinion, getting somebody else to take a look at your labs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's not just about normal levels, it's also things
Right.
having to do with one thing affecting another thing. And so it's a little bit more involved than just, oh, all normal levels.
I think that's the other thing that I've really taken from you is that all of this is data, and that the number on the scale is just data. It's not good, it's not bad, it doesn't hate me. It's just
Yeah.
it's just data, and it lets me know what I need to do. It gives me information about what my next moves are. And so I've really appreciated that because it's taken a lot of the emotion out of, there's a lot of emotion around weight loss and healthy living, and so it's taken a lot of that out of it and allowed me to just be objective about it, which is really fantastic. Really fantastic.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. You're an inspiration, Kristy, because there's so many
Thank you.
women that are out there trying to be perfect, and there's no such thing as perfection. And we're going to have so much better results in our health and our fitness when we just remove those feelings and emotions from it and look at it from data. It's really science, and you and I both know, going through
Yeah.
all the science classes and everything that we've been through, like it's all about science and that, the scientific method, basically,
Yeah.
doing your thing, collecting the data, reviewing it, all the variables, and then doing it again and making certain variable changes and all that. It's not complicated. And I think so many women are so worried about doing it perfectly that they don't want to do it at all because they fear failure. But we don't learn unless we mess up anyways. So we got to be willing to show up imperfectly, constantly showing up imperfectly. Girl, this whole week's been imperfect for me,
Girl, here
and
I
it's
am.
not the first time. It's not the first time, but 1 week does not define my health and my fitness. It's the long game, and it's the continued showing up over time. It's not one meal, 2 meals. It's not one workout, 2 workouts. It's the long game. It's continuing to show up imperfectly. So, and you're doing a great job. So I appreciate that you came on. Anything else you want to talk about? It feels like we've been kind of going on here almost an hour now. I want to respect your time.
Well,
I
I want
guess,
to thank you for letting me come on here. I know your audience is my audience too. That we are the ones taking care of our parents and wondering what's going on here. Is this the beginning of the end? Is this, just a fluke? And those are the people that I really care about because it's such a tumultuous time in our lives. And so if they got any little bit of information from our talk, I think that's great. I hope they take home to really just ask what's important and really have a good grip on that. But thank you.
yeah. And it's never too late. And so, yeah, for all of our listeners, ladies, I also just want to encourage you wherever you're at, like start there. Just
Yeah.
start there. That seems to be the biggest problem is just getting started, and just continuing to ignore. And we can't, you deserve to give yourself the best opportunity to feel better, to have the best fittest body that you can at whatever age that you're at and the healthiest. And it's never too late to make progress, to make improvements. And so just, yeah, sending out all the love, rockstar vibes to you ladies out there. Just get started. What's one thing you can do to get started? And if you do have any questions, where, Kristy, can people find you if they wanted to reach out to you? I'll put it in the show notes.
I'm on Instagram at ownyourend.co. Co. Also on Facebook at ownyourend. Yeah, there's no .co on the Facebook one, but it's fine.
Okay. And then we're going to put your checklist in the show notes too, so that could be a helpful tool to somebody who might need that. What, after years of doing what you do, I have this question here I want to ask you. For patients and families at the end of life, what has death and dying and all of this taught you out of all, these years that you've been doing this? What has it taught you about how we should live?
You can't wait. You never know when your time is. And, it's especially emotional when I'm talking to people who are dying to ask, what do you want the rest of your life to look like? But we all should be asking ourselves, what do I want the rest of my life to look like? And how can I start making it look like that? I think that's such an important question. What is important to me? Does my life look like that?
Yeah.
Am I happy with the trajectory I'm on? Because you got the power to change it now,
Absolutely.
And so that's really great. Yeah.
It is. And since you said that, can I piggyback off of that? Because another thing that I hear women saying when I ask them what their goal is, this is so common. They'll be like, well, my goal is I don't want to be like, my mom or my dad because they had this and they had that, which I know that can scare us into working on our health, but I just want to encourage you, just what you said, Kristy, focus on who you want to be, who you want to become, and not what you don't want. Because if you focus on what you don't want, you just get more of that. We got to focus on that. We can create that healthy, fit, best version of ourselves.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, yeah, thank you, Kristy. I'm so glad that we met last year at the conference.
Me too.
You were so sweet. I don't even know why, but I'll never forget that moment you came up to me during some time and you gave me a hug. And I was like, wow, thank you.
I have forgotten it, but it meant so much to you. It makes me sad.
It was really meaningful.
Remember.
I don't even know what it was, but for some reason, it really stuck with me that I didn't know you at all. And you gave me a meaningful hug. It was so kind. So anyways, this has been amazing. You're amazing, and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time, Kristy. And yeah, everybody, don't forget, always remember self-care, self-love all day, every day, and every way.
Rock on.
Right? Rock on.